Okay, guys, when last we met years ago, well, before fall break, I think, we were talking about folk and popular food preferences. Can I just preface all this by saying, when I got to my room this morning, it was 46 degrees. I felt a bit like the old school marm coming in early to stoke the fire, which was good. It's still pretty chilly in here. I don't know that it's 46 anymore, but it's nice and cold. So that's excellent. It's good. It's good to wake up to that. So anyway, we had talked about the Hebrews being forbidden in the Bible to eat animals that did not chew their cud or that had cloven feet, and that they were forbidden to eat fish lacking fins or scales. So they don't eat lobster or shellfish or anything that like crawls on the ground in the ocean, anything that's considered like dirty. And then Muslims don't eat pork for that same reason, and then Hindus don't consume cattle. Let me move some stuff around here. Okay. Okay. And then there's just some other preferences. Like in the Soviet Union, Pepsi was permitted for sale. Many other Soviet countries switched to Coke because Pepsi was associated with communism. And then cola preferences are influenced by religion, which is really interesting. So in Southwest Asia, where they're predominantly Muslim countries, they boycotted products that were sold in Israel because they were Jewish. For example, in Israel they sold Coke, so Coke was boycotted by countries that were predominantly Muslim. And then there are regional differences in the U.S. So Americans might choose beverages or snacks based on what's produced or grown or locally imported. I was actually just talking to two of my friends last night, one from Florida and one from Georgia, who eat boiled peanuts, which is not something that I'd even ever heard of growing up in Ohio. I don't know if you guys have heard of boiled peanuts. Kentucky's just a smidgen to the south of Ohio, but there are elements that are a lot different than Ohio. So I don't know if you guys have heard of boiled peanuts, but they sell them a lot on roadside stands in Georgia, and then they sell them in gas stations. I know there's a gas station in Lawrenceburg that sells them, and they are literally boiled peanuts, like frequently made in a crock pot, sometimes made in like a special like boiled peanut, I don't know, vat. And sometimes they're just like salty, sometimes they're Cajun. I do not like them. I think they're mushy, but people who like them are like my friend who likes them. Whenever she sees them, she pulls over. She's like, boiled peanuts. Anyway, so that's definitely a regional thing. So going back to our PowerPoint, wine consumption is relatively high in California, where most of the U.S. production is located. I have friends who I work with in the National Writing Project who are from Berkeley, and when I'm with them, they drink so much wine it blows me away. I'm just like, oh, I thought we were working. Like, it's crazy. But it's just a different attitude toward wine. And then cultural backgrounds affect the amount and types of alcohol and snack foods consumed. So relatively little alcohol is consumed in Utah because of the presence of the Church of Latter-day Saints, which advocates against drinking alcohol. And then there's high consumption in Nevada, where resorts are located. And then Texans prefer tortilla chips in greater numbers because of strong Hispanic American presence. And I imagine they're going to prefer homemade tortilla chips to, bagged tortilla chips, which we might prefer, or may not may not care very much about. And they may actually prefer like more of a Tex-Mex food, or even a real Mexican food, whereas we don't really even know the difference. Some of us do. Like when I went to Chile in college, I thought it was going to be like eating at a Mexican restaurant all the time. Chilean food is not Mexican food, as it turns out, and Chilean food is much more bland, and it wasn't gross, it was just not that great. Like when you order a salad in Chile, they bring you like this plate, and there's a tiny pile of corn, and there's a tiny pile of shredded carrots, and there's a tiny pile of like lettuce, and there's a tiny pile. It's like it's you know, all broken down for you, and you're like, oh, well, thank you. And things are very different. You know, the eating, I think it's similar to how things are in Europe. You go and you sit for an hour or two, and then they bring you some bread, and you eat that for a while, and you drink for a while, and then they might consider serving you food after a while. It's a very, very social experience. It's much more about being together and socializing than it is about eating. And as Americans, you know, coming from this like 28-hour trip, plane to smaller plane to bus to like 15-passenger van, driving through the desert. We were in a really small town in Chile. Like the last thing we wanted to do was like wait multiple hours for dinner. So it was a kind of a rude awakening, but we got used to it. And anyway, we'll talk more about that later. Okay, oh, this is a fun one. So you guys definitely have experienced the White Castle. Maybe, I don't know if you've been there or not, but they also have, do they have Crystal here? I know they have Crystal in the South, which is similar to the White Castle. And then you have Krispy Kreme. We have Krispy Kreme in Ohio, so this graphic should go a little bit higher up because we definitely have Krispy Kreme. I don't think we have Dunkin' Donuts in Ohio, but if you go up to the north, like if you go up to New York and DC, Dunkin' Donuts is like everywhere. In-N-Out Burger is out west. I don't think I've ever had an In-N-Out Burger. I don't know if any of you guys have. But so you can see where different restaurants proliferate in different parts of the nation. And grocery stores are the same way. Like in Ohio, we have Big Bear. We don't have that here. And then, is it in the South where they have Golden Eagle? And then they used to have Piggly Wiggly here. I don't think that's around much anymore. Maybe in smaller cities or smaller towns. And then some Winn-Dixies. We had a Food Lion in Boyle County. I'm trying to think what else. Publix. But I don't think I've seen Big Bears anywhere else. I miss the Big Bear. Okay. So, let's talk about housing. So housing is definitely going to be based on your resources, and folk houses are going to be, based on what's around, like stone, grass, sod, skins. And then the most common things are going to be wood and brick. And obviously, if you think of your little pigs, you're going to want things that are really going to hold up. And climate and local topography are going to influence the design of those houses. So this geographer, RW, you're going to notice that all geographers have these two, and have generally, not all, but generally have initials. Love that about them. So R.W. McCall compared houses in 4 Chinese villages, and he determines that they all use similar building materials, including adobe, which is like a mud brick, and timber from the desert poplar tree. But there are distinct designs in each location which are attributed to local cultural preferences and local geography. So we've got here on the left Kashgar, and look at how colorful that one is. Beautiful. And then we have in the middle Dunhuang, and it's kind of got this neat little like stripy pattern. I mean, I don't think it's supposed to be really a pattern so much as it's how the adobe is used. And then on the right at the top we have Turpin, and it's more plain, but look at how the top is done. Look up here. See how we have this little decorative place where the light is coming through? That's nice. And then in the bottom, Yinchuan, how they use kind of the grasses and reeds to create little awnings. So based completely on the preferences and the climate of that area, that determines how those same materials are used in different places. Oh, and look at the different types of roofs they have also. So you can think about that in the United States as well. There are different types of roofs in the United States based on how much snow, how much water we get, how much sun, because you don't want a flat roof where there's a lot of snow, because if you have a flat roof and there's a lot of snow, it will make your roof fall through. You want the snow to be able to fall down the roof. And you can have a flatter roof where it's warm and the sun will be reflected off the roof. Oh, let's talk about sacred spaces. So, sacred spaces in houses, there's a distinctive form of folk houses that may derive from religious or customary beliefs. Some sacred features are walls, the door orientation, which means which way the door it faces, whether it faces to the south, whether it faces to the east, and then the way the corners are. So houses in the south central part, for example, houses in the south central part of Java are going to face to the south. This is the direction of the South Sea goddess who holds the key to the earth. The eastern wall of a house is sacred in Fiji, and all directions face south. All directions except south have significance in folk houses in Madagascar. And I believe in the Navajo belief, if you go and see the Hogans in out west on the Navajo reservation, all of their doors face the same way as well, because they have beliefs about which way your door is supposed to face, which is pretty cool if you go out there. Okay, so if you look here, so here's a diagram in Laos, and it shows how much space there's supposed to be between the houses and the river, the front steps and the entrance, the direction. Oh, it shows the direction people are supposed to be sleeping. And then in Thailand, it shows the direction that people sleep. So see in Thailand how people are all sleeping one direction based on where the river is. See how their heads are all to the right. And then see how in Laos, the people's heads are all coming away from the ridgepole in the house. Which I don't know if you think about that. I sleep on a certain side of the bed, kind of no matter where I am, if I'm in a hotel, if I'm at my mom's house, if I'm in my own house. But I don't think about that as a religious or ritualistic thing. It's just kind of how I'm comfortable. So in northern Laos, in the fronts of the Lao houses, like in the Muang Nang, which is here on the left, the houses face one another across a path, and the backs of the houses face each other at the rear, and their ridge poles, which are the center line of the roof, are set perpendicular to the path but parallel to the stream. It's really specific. So if one is nearby, parallel to the stream if one is nearby. Inside adjacent houses, people sleep in the orientation shown, so neighbors are head to head or feet to feet. But then in Yuan and Shan peoples in northern Thailand, which is Ban Mae Sakud, which is the picture on the right, the houses are not set up in a straight line because of the belief that evil spirits move in straight lines. Ridge poles are parallel to the path, and the heads are all sleeping people point eastward. Okay, so let's look at the U.S. We have the style of pioneer homes reflected whatever upscale style was prevailing at the place on the East Coast from which they migrated. Geographer Fred Niffen doesn't have the initials there. Identified 3 major hearths or nodes of folk house forms in the U.S. In the Mid-Atlantic, the principal house type is known as an I house, with 1 room deep and at least 2 rooms wide. In the lower Chesapeake or Tidewater region or hearth, the principal house type is characterized by 1 story with a steep roof and chimneys at either end. And in New England, the principal house style was box-shaped with a central hall. So you can see how the houses dispersed from each of those hearths. So if you follow the red, that's the New England house, which is the one that had the box shape. And then the Mid-Atlantic, the purple line, is the one that was the is the one that was the I house. There was 2 full stories in height, 1 room deep, 2 rooms wide. And then the green line that goes down the coast, down Virginia and the Carolinas to Georgia, is the Lower Chesapeake and Tidewater. And that's the one that had the 1-story steep roof, chimneys at either end. It'd be interesting to like take a tour with that in mind and look for those particular houses. So, since the mid-20th century, house display popular culture rather than regional influences, and most people no longer build their own houses, but instead houses are mass-produced by construction companies. Houses show the influence of shapes, materials, detailing, and other features of architectural style that are in vogue at one point in time. So there are ranch houses. So my parents live in a ranch house. So that's a 1-story house that like stretches out, and it's really long. And then there's the minimal traditional. The split level has a lot of the house is 1-story, but then part of it is 2-story. So generally you're gonna have the bedrooms be 2-story. And then the mansard has that really interesting 2nd-story shape that slopes. See, that has the flat roof, but then it slopes really interestingly. Then the neo-French. So it has the neoclassical look in that it has the arched windows. And then we have the neo-colonial. So it's a new look at the colonial, where it's 2-story, but then it has the garage on it. Then we have the contemporary. It's kind of fun that it's called contemporary because it's not modern or contemporary really anymore. It was contemporary in the 1980s. It looks a little bit like the Brady's house. But it's got that flat look, very boxy looking. And then the shed, which has lots of different roofs. Then the neo-Tudor, which has lots of windows, lots of different triangular roofs. I think today a lot of people actually are, well, maybe not a lot, but more people are building their own homes. I know several people here at school who are building their own homes. My brother's building a house. It's interesting that people are kind of putting out there what they want their own homes to look like, rather than taking the ideas of I'm sure everybody consults architects, but it's interesting that people have their own ideas of what they want their houses to look like. Okay, electronic diffusion of popular culture. So the principal obstacle to accessing popular culture is a lack of access to electronic media. Most important electronic media format to popular culture is TV, for 2 reasons. Watching TV is the most popular leisure activity in the world. Do you think that's still accurate? I'm curious about that. I'm curious about that since phones are so, electronic devices, i.e. like phones, not iPods, but when I say phones, people aren't always calling on their phones. And so what I mean are like your electronic devices that you're using to access Twitter and access, I know you guys don't do the Facebook so much anymore, but access really Twitter and your news that way. Do you think TV is still the most popular leisure activity? And then it says TV is the most important mechanism for rapidly diffusing popular culture around the world. Do you agree with that? I'm not so good at the Twitter, but like a lot of people get their information a lot faster on Twitter, from Twitter, than I think even the news anymore. I don't even have, like, we have Netflix, we don't have regular TV in our house. I do think that puts me at a disadvantage because I'm not watching local news, but I feel like I still kind of keep up through Facebook. I think if I were better at Twitter, I would be more up on things. So I don't know that TV itself is really as popular and necessary as it used to be. I'd love to talk about that with you guys. Okay. So here's where this data study, let me see when this book was, it says 2014. I wonder, I'd love to know when this study was done. But I don't think we're going to get any deeper information than 2014, or any more specific information than 2014. This is the second edition of this book. You know, this book's first copyright is 2005. So this information may be as old as 2005, which is going to be vastly different, I think, than, I mean, what iPhone was out even in 2005, right? 2005, Lord, that was a long time ago. So look at watching TV, then socializing and communicating, travel and leisure, computer games. Think about computer games now. If you put computer games with, you know, playing a game on your phone, think how much bigger that would be. If you put for socializing, things like Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. Do we do Instagram now? And then, so if you did watching TV, socializing through social media, computer games on your phone, travel and leisure, reading, sports, relaxing and thinking. I don't think people think as much anymore. Anyway, I would love to know. We should totally survey people. We should do it. I think that should be something we do. Don't let me forget this. Don't let me forget, promise. Okay, so diffusion of TV mid-20th century. TV technology originated simultaneously in multiple hearths in the early 20th century. For example, UK, France, Germany, Japan, Soviet Union, and the US. Over the course of the 20th century, the US went from dominating the world share of TVs to being nearly equal in rates of ownership with most developing countries. Isn't that crazy? And you know what? I have been in people's homes where they live in deplorable conditions. You know what? Their TVs are awesome. Their cell phones are awesome. Now, I'm not talking about like in developing countries. I'm talking about here in the US. But it would be really interesting to witness that same phenomena in another country. I'm curious about that. Although I do know when I was in Chile, it's certainly, you know, this village that I don't want to call it a village. It was a town, but it was very, I mean, people lived in houses made out of trash. Like, that was the situation. But I remember walking up and down the street, and they were watching TV. What were they watching? I know it was an American show. I just can't think what it was. Okay. So this shows us TV in 1954, the spread of TV to 1970, and then the spread in 2005. Look at how many TVs. So we still got some places like in the you know, way in Africa, but really there's TV everywhere. There's a little bit of TV everywhere. Okay, electronic diffusion of the internet. Diffusion follows pattern established by TV, but at a more rapid rate, and that makes sense. In 1995, internet users in the U.S. accounted for more than half of the global users. By 2011, 77% of the U.S. population accessed the internet. This accounted for 11% of the global users, and global share decreased by roughly 40% in less than 10 years. So look at this, 1995, 2000, 2011. So when I taught in Boyle County, we had some pretty rural areas in Boyle County, and I had students who couldn't get the internet. And I had one student whose dad worked in Afghanistan, and she said her dad's access to internet in Afghanistan was better than her access to internet in Boyle County. It's pretty sad, right? Yeah. Okay, social media. So we've got the same diffusion pattern here. In 2008 in the United States, Facebook users in the U.S. consisted of 1/3 of all global users. By 2011, global users decreased. The global share in the United States decreased to 1/5, so it's spreading. Twitter, the U.S. was 1/3. It was the second leader. The second leader of tweets is India. So this is the percent of Twitter users. Look at Brazil, tons of Twitters. Look at Canada. Spain loves the Twitter. England, Germany, lots of tweeting going on. Japan. So challenges in accessing electronic media. Developed countries control the media. The U.S. industry dominated by Japan, UK, and the United States. I'm sorry. I was like, that's not even making sense. The TV industry is dominated by Japan, UK, and the United States. Leaders of developing countries could view dominance as impressing American values upon viewers. Impressing American values, impressing Western values. So we've got this upward social mobility, freedom for women, glorification of youth, stylized violence. So this idea that Western values and the concern of American values being spread to other countries that may not want these values. The news media in developing countries is dominated by the government, whereas the media in the U.S. is a largely private commercial, is contained by largely private commercial stations, and many African and Asian government officials criticize freedom of the press in the United States. So allegedly, media do not convey an accurate view of other countries. So African and Asian countries are afraid that what we see in the United States is not really accurate, and what their people will see is not really what's happening. And I mean, we could talk on and on about the use of media and if what we're seeing is accurate, if what they're seeing is accurate, if who has control of the media, blah, 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 blah. That could go on for days. Okay, so limiting access to TV. Satellite dishes enable people to access information that would otherwise be censored by their governments. Some governments attempt to limit internet content, including political content, opposition to local government, social content, socially sensitive materials such as gambling or sex, conflict and security, so armed conflict, border disputes, or militant groups, and internet tools, email, internet hosting, and internet searches. So there are certain countries where you can get Google, but its parts are blocked, or there's like an alternative to Google. So there, when you try to access things here at school, that there are certain things that are blocked. So imagine that you live in a country where there are similar blocks placed on your internet, based on what your government wants you to see. So these are countries where they filter based on these. So if you look up, it says China is going to block for political content, for conflict and security, and then like Saudi Arabia is going to block for social content, for internet tools. It looks like Iran is going to block for political content, social content, internet tools. And then, where are we in Africa there? Sorry, I didn't mean to bump you. Tunisia? Yeah, Tunisia. It looks like blocks for social content and internet tools. Okay, so sustainability challenges for folk culture. Increased connection with popular culture makes maintaining centuries-old practices difficult. Impacts of globalization on the landscape creates challenges in maintaining a unique landscape, and global diffusion of popular culture beliefs